Welcome back to Overhead Athletics. Joined today by Trevor. You've seen him in one of our videos in the past where he had a little bit of back pain. We just tweaked his stride a little bit, was able to alleviate that, and he was able to play through the year. Took a little time to train him out of that stride position across his body, but today what we're looking at is some other variables in his throw. So from motor learning perspective, we can think about environment intrinsic and body intrinsic training or focuses. Really what we're thinking about here is developing stability in a little bit better pattern in his throw, which requires disrupting some stability in an inefficient pattern. So for him, what we'll see is, and if you watch this video on the screen, what you'll see is that he drops his arm a little bit deep and side bends and kind of deviates off towards that glove side. So he actually comes out of a good postural position and violates what we call side bending, or he side bends while he rotates, which is not very efficient and actually disrupts core contraction profile, elongates one side of the core versus the other side, so it's not efficient from a rotational standpoint and a power standpoint. And when we talk about body intrinsic focuses or training, what we're trying to do is get his body to stabilize in a way where it has intrinsic control and he's able to stabilize against perturbations from the environment. So really, we've got to use some implicit training techniques. We've talked about what's going on in his throw, and we've looked at it together, but now we're actually going through throwing drills and progressions where he's not necessarily thinking about every exact motion and movement. He's thinking about completing the throw from the position or with the demands placed on him by the environment. So he develops a more body intrinsic motion, meaning a more stable motion where his body is able to stabilize the movement pattern a little bit better. We'll have him start in an athletic position. So we're going to go right back into that athletic position throw. He's in an athletic position here, arms out in front. And from right there, he's going to make a solid throw. Good. Go ahead and take just a half step forward for me. So we'll start with something that he can actually replicate here. And we're putting him into a position that's abnormal for him, but it's going to allow his core to be in a better position. So we're taking him closer to the quote-unquote attractor state, where he's got alignment, pelvic, shoulders on the same plane, nice straight through the spine, so he can actually rotate and not violate that postural control into side bending. Additionally, we placed his arm out in front of his body. So now, because his arm's further out in front of his body, he's not as close to the position of fault that he was in before. So go ahead and give me one more repetition there. Good. Okay. So now he's done that, we got to get him to actually incorporate maybe a little bit more time pressure. So by incorporating a shuffle step into this movement, now he's not able to take as much time to load and get so low into that back leg, but also he's limited the amount of time that he has to deviate out of a more efficient pattern. So go ahead and do a shuffle step from that same position. So here we are developing a more body intrinsic, anatomy based or anatomy stable, anatomy intrinsic movement. Body intrinsic movements really mean occurring naturally to the body and to the anatomy, meaning it's something that the anatomy is naturally or innately provided with the capacities to do. If you look at movement and you say he's way too deviated and side bent, where he actually deviates forward and then deviates off towards that side in the throw, that's not a very body intrinsic movement because it's not something the body is designed to do at a high rate of speed and do it with core stability. And that's part of the reason that we see back injuries and other spine injuries such as disc protrusions, herniations, actual pars interarticularis fractures, the Scotty dog fracture, things like that that we've actually seen in a lot of our athletes and that he's had to work through. They're all things that you can recover from fully and don't preclude you in any way from a long career, as long as you get into a quote-unquote naturally occurring movement that your anatomy can handle with better capacity. So I'm going to have you do the same thing with the leg up, and then we're going to add a component. And we've done a couple of these drills before we got on camera here, so he's had a little bit of practice. So we're taking him away from the position of the fault with the arm, having him start in a better position of his body so that when he moves through the throw, he can maintain better positioning as he goes. Good. Now we've actually got a 10-pound plate attached to this band. We were doing a few reps with that, but I'd like him to show just a couple with just the error augmentation of the band pulling him in the direction of fault. So we start in a good position of the arm, we'll start in a good position of the body, but now this added 30-pound band is actually pulling him into more deviation and side bending towards that glove side, which is the fault. So this is actually feeding the fault or facilitation of the fault, which is a technique we use all the time. Yep. As he moves faster and as more demands are placed on his body, he's going to have to move in a pattern that allows him to be more stable. And that's the whole goal of this. Place him into a better position so he can feel what that position feels like. And then place additional demands in the system that are going to force his movement to be more body intrinsic. Franz Bosch was one of the individuals that has given us some of the ideas on practical application of motor learning topics. But really what we're trying to do here is take what he's applied to his running and agility and make it more specific to specific deviations or flaws in the throw. The 10-pound weight here is bouncing around while he does this throw, which is going to make him have to stabilize better through his core. There's less available movement solutions for him, so he has to go into the one that the anatomy can best control. So when the anatomy can best control a certain movement, it's going to move into that movement when it doesn't have available options to compensate. In this case, he doesn't have as many options to compensate through side bending of his core because this weight here and this band are going to force him to move in a more efficient manner. And that's a very effective motor learning strategy. Good. Now we can make it more difficult.